So with that in mind, one of the things that I've always kind of struggled with, seeing all of these different spaces for women, right? And I do believe women should have a space for women. I
Hmm.
believe men should have a space for men. I'm not trying to take that away from women at all. But there's balance.
Hmm.
And you can't out heal the trauma and the pain of the other side. So as women enter into these spaces where they're going to get healing, when you step out of those places, especially if you're, in a heterosexual relationship and you deal with a man who is unhealed,
Hmm.
at some point you are going to be pulled back into a space of unhealing.
Indeed.
You know, so I've always thought about the utility of these spaces that are so heavy, oriented to the women, especially in spiritual spaces, right? So
Mm.
there are people who don't really have a spiritual background, but they understand there's a need for healing. I get that, if that's what they want to do, fine. But when you are in these spiritual spaces and you practice any form of spirituality, to me, it's like if we are really practitioners of spirituality, where's the push to, okay, let's invite the men in then? If there's no places for the men to exist, and we're doing all these things, healing the women, and we're only in our spaces, you would think, thinking about the balance, there would be some places to invite the men in, but there's not. Uh, what do you think about that as far as all these women getting healing, no spaces for men, and how useful that is, or you know, is it just like
Well,
a ticking time bomb waiting to
it
explode at some
is. I
point?
mean, it is to a degree because it's like a lot of what the women are healing from is stuff they've experienced with men. You know what I mean? That aren't
Right,
healed.
right,
So if they're going to get in their healing and they're in a relationship, sometimes the light bulbs are going to go off and they be like, this dude's not healthy. You know what I'm saying? And they're going to come back with language and awareness that's going to make it difficult for them to stay where they once were because they'll be able to
right,
identify how unhealthy it is. You know what I mean? So
right.
again, it's why it's necessary for men who have a certain awareness in practice to step up and start holding space for other men, you know what I mean? Because we can only do that for each other, and I think because of the way my observation is, because of the history of how things have gone, most men, most heterosexual men only really explore quote unquote being open, or I would say vulnerable, but that's a buzzword for me. Vulnerable is a funny word for me, but being
Right.
open or sharing certain things with women in their lives, but they only can go really to a point because women don't really understand, and we are also afraid to look too weak to the women in our lives, so we never really go where if we have a safe space amongst other men who have shared their pains and their whatever their senses of inadequacies or fears and all those things, then it
Mm-hmm.
becomes normal, like, oh, you've been through that too.
Right.
Oh, you went through that too, and now we can start talking. Now you could cry if you want to cry. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Right,
because that's
right.
what happens in our spaces. Brothers have cried who said they haven't cried since they were a little kid. You know what I'm
Hmm.
saying? And they'll start talking, and other brothers are like, "Yo, man, go ahead." And they cry, they talk, and they get it out, and they might get a hug, and nobody makes a big deal out of it. It's like, yo, you've been holding that for 20 years. You got to let that go. You know what I'm
Right.
Right,
saying?
right.
But that can only happen amongst men. So the sisters are doing what they do because that's what women have done. And also in the diaspora, I think the women have been empowered to a certain degree and allowed to do things to a certain degree that we haven't. You know what I mean?
Right.
So there's something that we have to kind of like get over because our gathering is seen as scary in the past. You know what I mean? Or as a threat.
Right.
So, we also have to we have to relearn how to commune together in a safe way as men, where we're not competing with each other and we're not there to like outdo each other and see each other as a threat or competition and all those things, you know?